a lot of discussion around the finals about something that to a lot of people does not seem like a big deal, and that is not having the decal of the trophy, the Larry O'Brien trophy, on the court for the NBA Finals. That is a thing that had been done for many years, and they have not. Now, the NBA has said that the reason that they no longer have the decals on the floor, because they don't even have like the decals for the finals either, but the reason that they don't have the decals on the floor is because the players were slipping on them. That is a good reason to not put those decals on the floor. That is not a good reason to stop putting decals on the floor. Stop putting decals on the floor that the players trip and fall on. I feel like you can send it back to the lab and there is somebody who went to graduate school and got a PhD to become an engineer because he thought that he was going to solve the world's great problems. And then he found out that the real money was in making decals for the NBA, and you need to go tell him to make it non-slip. And I want to say something right fast about those engineers, and this is something to think about that nobody ever thinks about, right? Everybody that's in engineering school or whatever that wants to be a big-time engineer, and I imagine a lot of them just want to get that paper, right? But I also imagine that they look at the world, and when they decided they was going to get into this and they started doing more and more, their thoughts were that they was really going to like shake things up. They was going to be out here. They had grand dreams, man, of everything it is that they wanted to do. And there's some dude, and I'm being very particular about this right now, being a dude. There's some dude out there that after all those dreams and everything else, every day he wakes up and he says to himself, self, there has got to be a way that we can make that maxi pad even more absorbent. That's his life. Now, look, I imagine that there is a woman who has that job who was like, girls, I'm going to make these maxi pads more absorbent. And they are like, thank you. But this dude, that is not why he signed up to do this. I know that the decal man did not want his life's work to be making the decal the least slippery as it could be. But somebody need to get on the motherfucking job.
It's just like every live musician you ever see, that was not their dream. They were all in their mind separate rock stars.
Hold on. Every radio executive who has a first name and a last name that's also a first name, because the original plan was to be a host. Correct. And then they realized they would be better off bossing hosts around, right? It's the same exact situation. Anyway, the decals being slippery was not a good enough reason to stop putting them on the floor. Figuring out how to make them non-slippery was the play. And I have seen people online raise the very fair question, why is there so much discussion about putting the trophy decal on the floor? And I would argue that it's not so much specifically about the trophy decal itself. It is about the fact that the way that the finals have been presented has made the games just feel like games, as opposed to something that is a really, really, really big deal. And I think something that is lost or that people may not understand about doing these sorts of things, if the people presenting do not make what they're doing seem like a big deal, then the people watching will not believe that it is a big deal. Presentation matters a lot. Think about how much presentation matters when serving food. And that is something that serves a functional purpose, right? What do they call it? Plating. That's what they do, and getting your colors right and everything else. You go to a fancy restaurant, they don't serve you the shit on styrofoam and the plates with the cutouts on them. They don't do that, okay? They do that maybe at a barbecue, but you know a barbecue is a big deal because you can smell it in the air. You know what I'm saying? You got to dress the plates up so that people understand what kind of meal this is. And what the league has not really done is dress the plates up. I saw this bounce around a few weeks ago, but somebody had run a clip of, I want to say it's maybe before Game 6 of the 1998 finals, but it was one of those 1990s finals And it's Bob Costas, and he's talking about the Bulls, and I guess it was the Bulls and the Jazz. So it was either 97 or 98. And the language that he was using implied or conveyed a real significance and depth and importance to the moment that everybody was in. Now, of course, you had Jordan, and it was Jordan to the end of his career if it was 98. So that becomes a little easier for you to spell out. But there was something to be said about what it means to hear Bob Costas' voice, and then to hear Bob Costas in one of his, once again, incredibly written pieces. And I've worked for 2 seasons with Bob on his show on HBO, man. The man don't miss, right? But it felt like a big deal. And then they go into it and they turn the lights off. It's and it's like, okay. And you feel it. Like to this day, if you go somewhere and they play Sirius, Sirius, you go feel it, right? And you're going to feel it because it is part of the idea that those Bulls games were big deals. And they cut the lights because, see, people don't know this. The Bulls weren't the first to cut the lights for the intros. I want to say the Sixers were the first to do it, but that was a novel thing. It felt like something when that happened. You got to dress these games up like they matter. And so the NFL still gets this. And the NFL has some advantages. Notably, they play the games outside. So you can fly fighter jets and all this stuff over there. But the NFL always manages to make its games feel like a big deal. Now, they, again, also have an advantage of how few games there are. So there are big deals then by definition. But with basketball, you're going to have to do more to make it feel like a big game, right? During the LeBron era, everything felt like a big game because that man was fighting for his life for like 4 straight years. From game 6 of the 2010 Eastern Conference semifinals against Boston, all the way through really game 7, 2013, everything was about the legacy of LeBron James. Think about how many most important games of his career that LeBron had through that stretch. There were so many of them, and we knew that going into every game. Every game felt like not so much the end of the world, but the impact of it felt so strong because the stakes were so clear. But the stakes weren't simply clear because they were self-evident. They were clear because we told you, we being the people in this business, we told you over and over and over and over again what were the stakes. We were watching the LeBron James dynasty saga. You've heard me use that term before about teams, but specifically LeBron, we were following that story. And then after 2016, we just didn't have as much story to follow, right? Once he got to the ultimate mountaintop, winning the championship with the Cavs. We then, to the next 2 years, had Kevin Durant Warriors championships, which just didn't feel the same because we knew they were going to win, right? Even LeBron 2020 in the bubble, it just didn't feel the same. People have asked the question about whether or not the NBA's problem is that it's selling players over teams. And no. That is not the problem. The problem is that they haven't found another player to sell, right? If the players were a little bit more interesting or the stories were a little bit deeper, then selling players is fine. The NFL does not sell teams over players. The NFL sells the NFL over anything else. And you can do that with the nature of that sport. What everybody in basketball needs to understand is it's not football. Therefore, you cannot sell it like it's football. You can't do it. One of my chief criticisms of ESPN's coverage of the NBA is that they treat the NBA like the NFL. You can't cover it the same way. People don't want the breakdowns of strategic minutia in basketball the way that they want them in football, right? Basketball is a little more loosey-goosey. It's a little bit more free. That's how people more likely want to talk about it. You can't do quick bullet point discussions in the way that ESPN does. But what's so interesting about that to me is the part that you can treat like football is making the games feel like big deals. And that's the part that they don't do. That's the part that the league does not do. So when you come out here and you don't have any signage on the court to indicate that it's the NBA Finals, it already looks like a goddamn AAU tournament with the coaches wearing quarter zips and anybody wearing any old jersey that was clean. You can't tell who the home team was just by looking on the floor. You got to make this feel like something. And the part that people mess up on, and I think that this is somewhat part and parcel with the issue that we're discussing here. You'll hear people make the point when talking about sports that it's entertainment, and that is not true. Sports is entertaining, but it is far more significant to people than entertainment. Okay. Yeah, there's an occasional movie franchise that gets people lining up at night and they talk about it for days or whatever it is, or But movies don't mean to people with sports.
Doesn't stick with people.
It doesn't stick. It doesn't mean the same thing to people. It doesn't pass down through families in that way. It doesn't transcend generations in that way. Sports are entertaining, not entertainment. Because the problem is, if you treat sports like entertainment, then sports get treated like the rest of entertainment gets treated right now, which is something that is not intended to be excellent, something that is not intended to be momentous, something that is not intended to be monumental, but simply something intended to occupy your time and attention. Just something for you to watch, not something for you to feel, not something to captivate you, just something to occupy you. That is how entertainment is treated right now. You don't want sports to be that. You don't want to be so cynical to strip away all the larger things and act like it doesn't matter, right? It does. I've been a person that's done a lot of work that's been around, we treat sports like they're too big a deal. No, we treated sports unhealthily is what I realized. And I think that we conflated that unhealthiness with acting like it's a big deal. And I think there's room to do two things at once, right? But play up the pageantry, play up the stuff around it. An audience needs it. Very similar to how if you are doing comedy, overwhelmingly, not entirely, but overwhelmingly, audiences are very much so helped by laugh tracks. Sometimes people need to know when to laugh.
When I think about presentation, and something you've talked about a lot, and this isn't just a football phenomenon. You think of two big events that are almost exclusively presentation. One is the Kentucky Derby.
Yes.
It's just a big that is 6 hours of presentation for a 3-minute race.
Yes.
And then the other one, obviously, is the Masters.
Yes.
And that's
that is it.
And that is something that feels like a big deal, specifically because they tell you their whole brand is this is the biggest deal.
Yes, you got to do it. What the NBA tried to do then was just beam in some trophies on the floor, which, by the way, should have been your first idea once you decided. You beam in everything else for paper, right? You should have might as well. And see, that is what it makes me think. It makes me think that they needed to get that real estate back so they could sell it. But the YouTube TV logos, they be on there. You know what I'm saying?
They're on there and they're working.
That's right. They had the room to do all of this stuff. It doesn't matter if you already got the money. Give the people something they can feel. And when you do that, that's when it becomes contagious. People who don't even pay attention or don't care, you know what it feels like when it's a big deal. And when something is a big deal, case in point, Ryan, the Kentucky Derby, I don't give a damn about no horses. But it feels like a big deal. People know it's a big deal, so they're going to check it out.
You're learning who these people are as the show's going, right? Like
yes.
Everything is, being brought to you. You're learning as you're going. And I think the NBA and ESPN can do a better job of really telling the story from the start.
This is why it seems small, but the trophy on the floor and having the finals logo and those things, there is something to it. This is not beating the NBA or they're always doing something wrong or people don't even like the game and Nah. I'm just telling you, if you want it to feel like something, you got to act like it's something. And if you don't act like it's something, why the hell would anybody else?